Hey YouTube, today we're going to be looking at some Colt revolvers, and we're going to continue our little series we've been doing on comparing different triggers to different handguns. So what I have here is an older vintage Colt Python from 1984, and I have a couple newer Colt revolvers. I have the newer release Colt Python, and I have the newer release Colt Anaconda. And the Anaconda's in 44 Magnum, and the Pythons are in 357 Magnum. But before we get started, I'm going to let you know none of these revolvers are loaded, and as I pick them up, I will show you that we are clear to make this video. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the triggers and the differences in the older vintage Colt Python and the newer ones that they've just released here within the last few years. So we'll get started. We're going to pick up this older one. This is a stainless Colt Python. This one was from the year 1984, and I'll show you some close-ups of it here. So what the Colt Python was known for is it was a premium revolver that was released in 1955, and what they did is they had a bunch of gunsmiths working on these in the Colt custom shop, and they hand polish and hand fit together all the parts on this. So it actually required a human being to sit there and fit stuff in. Usually a lot of the parts are oversized, and they filed them and stoned them and made them smooth on the inside to make this action work as smooth as it was. If anybody who's watching this video has never handled one of these older Colt Pythons, it's a treat. If you go into a gun show or a gun shop that has one of these older ones, first thing you do is pick it up and grab this hammer here, and man, is it smooth. The action on these things is just so smooth, it works like nothing you've ever seen. So, and it was actually more of a treat before they came out with all these new ones, because you never really saw these things laying around. They were super expensive, and they just weren't like readily available out on the market, and a lot of people shy away from them because of the price that they command in today's time. Well, they've always been expensive, and it's the extensive handwork that goes inside this action work. Very complicated on the inside of them, and it usually requires a very skilled gunsmith to do any kind of work on these things. So the first thing you notice is how smooth it is, and what we're going to be doing, we're going to compare the trigger to the newer ones that's been out here within the last few years. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the double action and the single action trigger on this 1984 Colt Python. So I'm going to pull this hammer back and get you a real close-up of this. If you notice, unlike the semi-automatics I've been showing, there's not any take-up on this thing. So when you pull back on this thing, all you do is put your finger on the trigger, and you acquire your target, and you just apply a little bit of pressure, and this thing is very crisp, and it goes off. It's just about as smooth as you can possibly expect to have on any handgun. It's probably around the 3.5 pound pull on this trigger. So when you get into the double action, this is the difference, and you'll see here in a second in the newer Colt Pythons and the older ones. So when you pull this back, it's smooth all the way through. You see it just works real smooth, but when you get to the very end of the trigger pull, like right here, it seems to tense up a little bit, and that's called stacking, and it makes it creates like a second wall, I guess you should say, is maybe the incorrect term to describe it, but it's what I'm going to use. And the way that I always describe this to people is when you're shooting one of these things, when you're holding this thing, and I'm going to hold my hand out of the way here, but when you're shooting one of these things, you can almost stage this trigger and then follow through when you acquire the target. So you can get a real accurate double action pull on this thing, and I like it a lot. I'm just really used to these older Colt revolvers. I've had a lot of time on them, and I really like the way that they operate, but a lot of people never thought that they would be able to recreate this action with these newer ones, because there's virtually no hand fitting involved in the newer ones. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up the second one here, and this is the exact same configuration, but this is one of the newer released Colt Pythons from the last 3 or 4 years that come out. I'll show you some close-ups of it. It just says Python. Looks just like the other one. Now, When you pull this one back, it's equally as smooth. They've recreated that smooth action on the inside, so you can pull the hammer back. It feels a little bit different, but very similar to the one that I just had in my hand. And you'll notice when you pull on this trigger, it's the same thing. There's no take up. You just apply pressure to it, and it goes off. Now this one seems to be just a little bit heavier single action pull than the older one, just a little bit different. But where the difference is when you're shooting double action, when you pull on this trigger right here, it's smooth all the way through. It doesn't have that that stacking at the very end. So I'm going to try and show you on camera here one more time. If we look at the older one, when you do the double action, you pull back here and it seems to stack right here. It just gets a little bit tenser before it goes off. So it's smooth all the way through, but it just gets a little bit tenser when you get to the very end. And on the newer ones, it doesn't do that. When you pull this trigger, it's just smooth all the way through. So when you're acquiring your target, you don't have to stop or stage it or anything like that. I'll move my hands all the way. You sit there and just smooth work this action all the way through. And what that does is when you're acquiring target, you don't have to fight this gun or anything when you're trying to pull, and it has a different amounts of tension on it or anything, and it makes it more of an accurate shot. A trigger pull, how smooth it is and the poundage and all that stuff is very important when it comes to being accurate with a handgun. Now, the last one I have here is the Colt Anaconda, and this is in 44 Magnum. Now, the older Anacondas that they had was a completely different action than the premium Colt Python, but these newer ones are awesome. So what this is just an exploded version, a larger version of this Colt Python here. It's in 44 Magnum, and this thing has the same lockwork on the inside, the same action, and it's real smooth when you pull it back. And the single action on this thing is exactly the same. Just apply pressure to it, and it goes off. But the double action, there's no stacking, and it's smooth all the way through. And I would say these double actions on these newer Colt revolvers are somewhere in the 7 to 8 pound range for a double action pull, which is exceptional and very light for a for a double action trigger pull. But the important part is the smoothness, and there's no grittiness or anything like that. So these things are made all on CNC machines, and they're not hand fit together by humans or anything like that. They're assembled by humans, but all the parts just automatically fit because they're cut out by a CNC machine. But the important part is how they simplified this action on the inside of these Anacondas and Pythons. They made them a lot more simple than they did the older ones here. So when you pull on this trigger, it's just smooth all the way through. Now, it's all personal preference on what people like, whether this stacking at the end of this older Python bothers you or not. It's not really that big of an issue to me. It's just you can feel the difference. You can feel there's more stuff going on inside this older Python, but it's still got a smooth trigger pull, and I like the fact that you can kind of sit there and stage it right there, and you can make the most accurate shot. Now, we're not talking about we're getting into a defensive situation with a revolver or anything. We're talking about target shooting, and if you were sitting there and you're slow precision target shooting, you might be able to get a little bit of advantage by being able to stage this back just a little bit, acquire your target and go in. Or some people like it that you acquire your target on these newer ones and it just goes a lot smoother all the way through. And it's the same tension all the way through. It's all personal preference on what people like. But I wanted to do a trigger comparison. I've been through the differences on these guns, these older ones versus the newer ones many times. But I want to show you what a difference in the triggers to the older vintage Colt Python versus the newer Colt revolvers, which is a Colt Python here and an Anaconda here, which is exactly the same action except for it's chambered in 44 Magnum, has a bigger frame. But anyway, let me know what you think about these trigger comparisons on these Colt revolvers, and if anybody's had experience with both of them, If you have any questions on any of these firearms, I have extensive videos on each and every one of them, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you very much for watching my video today, and you folks have a great day.